The rain had stopped 3 days ago, but the mud around Mercy Creek was still deep enough to swallow a boot. Mara Bell knew that because she was kneeling in it when the ranch foreman told her she had 1 hour to leave. "You stole from Mr. Vale," Grady Pike said. Mara looked at the small brass key in her palm. "No, I found it." "Found it where?" "Beneath the ledger." "You expect me to believe that?" Mara lifted her chin. She was 28, sun-browned from years outdoors, with dark hair pinned beneath a faded blue scarf. She had learned long ago that frightened people often mistook a quiet woman for a weak one. "I expect you to believe the truth." Grady stepped closer. "Truth won't keep you warm tonight." A horse screamed from the corral. Every head turned. Then came another sound. 3 hard shots from somewhere beyond the north. Pasture. The ranch hands reached for their rifles. Grady swore and ran toward the barn. Mara followed. She should have been thinking about her iron trunk, her mother's letters, and the accusation waiting for her at the house. Instead, she saw a rider come through the rain-soaked gate at a dead gallop. The horse was lathered, white. The rider was barely holding the saddle. He made it 10 yards into the yard before he fell. Mara reached him first. He was a man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered, wearing a black trail coat torn at the sleeve. Blood darkened his ribs. One hand was clamped around a leather satchel. "Don't move," Mara said. His eyes opened. They were gray, sharp and far too calm for a man who had just fallen from a horse. "Hide this," he whispered. He pushed the satchel toward her. Mara stared at it. Then she heard riders in the distance. Grady raised his rifle. "Everyone inside!" The stranger grabbed Mara's wrist. "If they find this bag, people in Mercy Creek will die." That was the moment Mara forgot about being fired. She looked toward the road. 4 riders were coming through the mist, and one of them was wearing the badge of the county marshal. Mara made her decision. She took the satchel, not because she trusted the stranger, not because she understood him, but because the look in his eyes told her he was afraid of something much bigger than himself. She dragged him behind the hayshed just as the riders entered the yard. "Who is that?" Grady shouted. Mara looked back. The stranger was already unconscious. "Nobody," she said. It was the first lie she had ever told on Double Creek Ranch. By sunrise, it would cost her everything. Mercy Creek sat where the old wagon trail crossed the Red Fork. A hard little frontier town with a blacksmith, saloons, a church, and a crooked courthouse. For 6 years, Mara had worked at Double Creek, eventually becoming the ranch bookkeeper. She knew the cattle brands and every debt in Vale's ledgers. For months, cattle had been disappearing from neighboring ranches. The numbers did not match the herds, and every trail led back to Double Creek. She had begun copying figures into her mother's old Bible when she found the brass key. It opened a locked drawer in Vale's office. Inside was a list of ranchers, bankers, a judge, and the county marshal. Grady had caught her reading it. Now, with the stranger hidden behind the hayshed, she understood why the marshal dismounted. "Grady!" he called. "We heard a rider came this way." Grady walked forward. "No rider here." The marshal's eyes moved toward Mara. "You sure?" She held his gaze. Only person who came through that gate was the wind. The marshal smiled without humor. Funny. Wind usually doesn't leave. Blood on a saddle. Mara's stomach tightened. He had seen the horse. Before he could move, a bell rang from the barn. One of the horses had kicked its stall. The marshal turned. Mara used the moment to slip behind the shed. The stranger was gone. The satchel was missing too. A boot print crossed the mud toward the creek. He had awakened, and he had left her to face the danger alone. By noon, Mr. Vale had returned from town. He was a silver-haired man in his 50s, polished and accustomed to being obeyed. He listened to Grady, then looked at Mara. You stole from me. Found evidence of cattle theft. You found a reason to betray your employer. I found names. The room went silent. Vale's expression changed for less than a second. Fear, then. It was gone. Give me the key, he said. No. Grady moved toward her. Vale raised and not here, he walked closer until only a few feet separated. Them. You think this is about cattle, Mara, isn't it? No. He looked toward the window. This is about power. Then he whispered, and you have no idea whose attention you have attracted. That night, Mara packed her iron trunk. She carried the satchel beneath her coat, knowing that staying meant disappearing. But before she could leave the ranch, she heard a soft knock. Against the kitchen door, she opened it. The stranger stood in the darkness. His wound had been bound with a strip torn from his own shirt. You lied for me, he said. You left me. I had to. Who are you? He hesitated. My name is Elias Ward. That's not enough. No. He looked at the satchel. Neither is the truth. He opened it. Inside were railroad bonds, a revolver, and a folded map marked with red circles. Mara recognized the circles immediately. Everyone was near a ranch whose cattle had disappeared. The railroad? She whispered. Elias nodded. Someone is buying land along the Red Fork through stolen cattle money. When the ranchers fail, the railroad buys them cheap. Mara looked at him. Why would you know that? Because I own the railroad. For several seconds, neither spoke. Mara almost laughed. He looked nothing like a railroad owner. His coat was torn. His boots were muddy. Blood had dried at his collar. You expect me to believe you're a wealthy man? I expect you to believe the evidence. He unfolded another paper. At the bottom was Samuel Vale's signature, followed by Judge Bellamy and Grady Pike. Her throat went dry. They're planning something tomorrow night, Elias said. A train arrives at 11. It carries payroll money and federal documents. They intend to rob it. Blame the robbery on the ranchers and use the panic to seize the whole valley. Mara stared at the map. Why tell me? Because you already chose a side. I didn't choose your side. No, Elias said. You chose the truth. A horse whinnied outside. Both of them froze. Then came the sound of boots on the porch. Grady's voice drifted through the darkness. Mara, Mr. Vale wants to see you. Elias reached for his revolver. Mara caught his arm. If you shoot him, they will know you're here. What do you suggest? She looked toward the back wall. There is an old flower chute. You want me to crawl through that? I want you to live long enough to stop a train robbery, he looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Mara opened the hidden hatch. Elias disappeared into the darkness. Grady entered. His rifle was already raised. You've been busy. Mara, she stood beside the cold stove. I was packing. Grady smiled. Then you won't mind if I search the trunk, Mara. Looked toward the floor. The satchel was gone, but the brass key was still in her pocket. Grady stepped. Closer. Where's the stranger? Mara said nothing. His smile disappeared. Where is he? Before she could answer, a shot cracked outside, then another. The horses began screaming. Grady turned toward the door. Mara knew instantly. The robbery had begun a night early, and somewhere in the darkness, Elias Ward was riding straight toward it. The gunfire rolled across Double Creek like thunder. Grady rushed outside. Mara ran the opposite way toward the old water tower. From its roof, she saw 3 riders racing toward Mercy Creek and another horse coming from the east, Elias. He was riding hard, one hand on the reins, the other holding his revolver. Behind him came 6 armed men. The robbery had begun. Mara released the ranch's fastest mare and rode after him. Mara, go back! Elias shouted. No, you don't understand. I understand enough. They reached the Red Fork Bridge just before midnight. The explosives are beneath the center span, Elias said. Mara looked down at the swollen river. Then let's get them out. They climbed beneath the bridge. 4 crates of dynamite were wired together. The fuse was already burning. 3 minutes, Elias said. They carried the first crates toward shore. The third was wedged beneath a beam. Together they pulled until it came loose. Then the train whistle sounded. The locomotive was almost on top of them. Elias reached for the last crate. But Mara saw the burning fuse. She kicked the dynamite into the river. The explosion shook the bridge. Elias caught Mara as she fell, his injured shoulder nearly giving way. They reached the riverbank as bullets struck the mud around them. Sheriff Reed and 4 federal marshals arrived from Mercy Creek. The gunman fired back. Grady Pike appeared. On the bridge, he aimed at Elias. "You should have left him in the mud," Grady shouted. Mara stepped into view. "It's over," Grady shook his head. "You don't know what happens if those papers reach Washington." Now Mara understood. The documents were proof that men inside the territorial government had been selling land and public contracts. Grady lowered his rifle. "Vail offered us a future," he said. "I spent 30 years watching men get rich while men like me stayed poor. You could have chosen another way." Mara replied, "There is always a price." He raised his rifle. A shot rang out. Grady dropped. Sheriff Reed lowered his smoking gun. "It's done." But Samuel Vail was already gone. When Mara and Elias returned to Double Creek, the office had been emptied. The safe stood open. On the floor lay a deed. Mara read it and went pale. The Eastern Valley had already been transferred to a hidden holding company. "Can he keep the land?" she asked. "Not if we find the original records?" "Where?" Elias looked at the brass key in her hand. "The old mission." They rode before dawn. The abandoned mission stood 20 miles north. Beneath the ruined chapel was an iron door. The brass key fit. Inside were ledgers covering years of payments, land transfers, and bribes. Then Mara found a letter signed by Samuel Vail. He had paid the marshal. He had financed the cattle thefts. He had bought failing ranches through false debts. But one name stopped Elias cold: Jonathan Ward. "My brother," he said. Mara looked at him. "You knew?" "I suspected. That's why I came here disguised. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know whether I could trust anyone." Mara closed the ledger. "You trusted me with your life." Elias looked at her. "I did." They returned to Mercy Creek with the ledgers hidden beneath the saddle blanket. By noon, the courthouse was surrounded. Vail stood on the steps beside Judge Bellamy and Jonathan Ward, the railroad executive who had betrayed his own family. Jonathan looked at Elias. "You should have stayed away. You should have come home." Jonathan laughed. "Home? You mean the company our father left us?" "I mean the family you sold." Federal marshals moved forward. Jonathan drew his pistol. The courthouse erupted in panic. He and Vail ran toward the stables. Mara saw the route. "The cattle pens!" She ran. Elias followed. Jonathan mounted a horse. Vail was already riding away. Mara reached the main gate and pulled the release. The herd thundered into the alley. Jonathan's horse reared. He fell. Vail crashed into a fence trying to escape. Elias reached him. "First, you need me." Vail gasped. "No." "You need my connections." "No." "You'll lose the railroad." Elias looked toward Mara. "I'd rather lose a fortune than keep it by becoming you." The marshals took Vail and Jonathan away. The stolen deeds were returned. The judge resigned. The ranchers of the Red Fork kept their land. The trial lasted through the summer. Mara testified first. She told the court about the missing cattle, the hidden drawer, and the names she had copied before the ledgers disappeared. Elias followed. He admitted that he had traveled under a false name because he suspected corruption inside his own company. "I thought money could solve every problem," he said. "Then I learned that money without trust only gives a man more ways to be afraid." Samuel Vale and Jonathan Ward were sentenced for fraud, theft, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The county marshal resigned before the federal investigation was complete, but Mara cared less about their punishment than what came afterward. The ranchers formed a cooperative. They shared cattle records, inspected brands together, and refused to let one wealthy man control the valley again. Mara became its bookkeeper. Then she bought 20 acres beside the Red Fork. It was not much. A small house, a barn, a stubborn patch of grass. But it was hers. One autumn evening, Elias returned before sunset. He found Mara repairing a fence. "You could hire someone for that," he said. "So could you," he laughed. She handed him a hammer. "Then stop talking." They worked until the sky turned purple. When they finished, Elias leaned against the fence. "I have another question." Mara looked at him. "Are you planning to spend your life repairing fences?" "Somebody has to." "Then perhaps I should stay." She studied him. "You said Denver. I changed my mind. Because of me?" He shook his head. "Because I finally found somewhere I want to belong." Mara looked across the pasture, then held out her hand. Elias took it. There was no grand promise, no hurried declaration, just two people who had survived a hard season and discovered that trust was worth more than gold. For Mara Bell, that was enough. Winter came hard that year. Snow covered the Red Fork, and for several weeks no stagecoach reached Mercy Creek. Mara kept working. She balanced the cooperative's accounts by lamplight, checked the cattle reports, and repaired whatever broke. One evening, she found a small package on the porch. Inside was her mother's old Bible, cleaned and rebound. Mara had left it in the courthouse after the trial. A note was tucked between the pages. "I thought you might want this back." No signature. She knew who had sent it. The following spring, Elias returned. He did not arrive with a train of guards or an expensive carriage. He came alone on a bay horse, carrying one saddlebag. Mara was standing beside the fence when he rode into the yard. "You came back," she said. "I said I would. You also said Denver." Discovered Denver was colder than Mercy Creek, she laughed. He dismounted. A moment they simply looked at each other. Then Elias held out his hand. "I have no business." "Proposal. Good. No railroad papers. Better. No secrets." Mara considered that. "That. One may take some practice," he nodded. "I know." She took his hand. Years later, the ranchers of Mercy Creek still remembered the night the railroad bridge nearly fell into the Red Fork. They remembered the gunfire and the powerful man who lost everything. But most remembered Mara Bell. She had learned that courage did not mean standing alone. Sometimes it meant choosing who was worth standing beside. And Elias learned that wealth meant very little if it could not be used to protect what was right. If this Old West story gave you a little piece of the frontier to carry with you tonight, tell me what you would have done in Mara's place. And if you enjoy Western stories about courage, loyalty, frontier life, and unexpected love, subscribe and join us for the next ride.